for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to start with Dr. Bright. In your just general info on BARDA, it says BARDA meets its mission by supporting product innovation, advanced development, acquisition, and stockpiling, and building manufacturing infrastructure. Given the threat of emerging infectious mosquito-borne diseases, would BARDA's mission for developing medical countermeasures also include the development of mosquito control technology?
Thank you for that question. It is a very important question, and currently the short answer is no, our scope does not include vector control. However, we have been monitoring it very closely as an innovation in vector control and are considering is there data to support that vector control can also be associated with as a medical countermeasure in the reduction of disease. And so we're working closely with the companies to better understand those technologies.
That's interesting, and I'll see what I can figure out, but I agree it's probably something that ought to be in your wheelhouse, so to speak. I'm going to switch and jump off of some of the issues that we've heard today, and Dr. Peterson talked about the situation in Puerto Rico a few minutes ago related to dengue and the testing to determine whether or not Zika is there when you have a population that's been exposed to dengue. And Dr. Fauci, that raises the question, when you were testifying about the vaccines and the DNA vaccine where you take a part of the gene of the Zika virus and the body then responds to the protein, because of the close relationship with other diseases like dengue and chikungunya, does that mean that there's a possibility, and should we be looking for it, that the vaccine for one will inadvertently or maybe intentionally create a vaccine for all three of those diseases which are so closely related?
Well, we should be so lucky, but unfortunately that's not the case, because even though there's cross-reactivity of antibodies, for example, from Zika to other flaviviruses like dengue and yellow fever, there's not cross-protection. So if you have an antibody against one, you don't protect against, even though they can be confused in a laboratory test. They're not physiologically protective. But having said that, Mr.
I was hoping.
Well, wait a minute. The hope springs eternal, because having said that, there is work going on right now to actually try and develop a universal flavi vaccine, where you get the component of the vaccine that you present to the body is a common part of the flavivirus that actually is in all the flaviviruses. Whether or not that part is going to induce a protective response is unclear, but there is work thinking exactly as you're thinking right now. Can you actually get a universal, the same way as we're trying for a universal influenza vaccine?
Right. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Dr. Peterson, you raised the issue, of course, about Puerto Rico and dengue, and they of course, had so much exposure last year to Zika that they won't show as much exposure this year because such a large percentage of the population was already exposed. And I was just wondering what work's being done. I'm going to switch gears on you just slightly, so bear with me. I read a report and was somewhat concerned that even though it was a very small study, that back in March, the American College of Cardiology said that there's a link between Zika and heart disease. And since we have a large population that was in fact exposed to Zika, is there any work being done to see if there's a larger study that could be done to determine what the links between Zika and heart disease, if any, are out there?
We do not have a specific study looking at heart disease and Zika, looking at that link between heart disease and Zika. What we are looking at is the general spectrum of syndromes associated with infection with the Zika virus, heart disease being just one of them. There's a variety of neurological conditions that we're looking at as well. So it's part of a larger effort to look at the complete spectrum of disease manifestations with Zika virus.
And when you say you're looking at other neurological issues, that's not just in newborns or the fetus, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, I appreciate that. Dr. Person, GAO reports that the grant funds awarded for mosquito control may not make it to some local control districts, and that the CDC does not directly monitor mosquito control entities for the use of grant funds. Assuming that's correct, what do we need to do to make sure that the money we're spending is actually being monitored and it actually goes to where we think it's going, which is to control mosquitoes?
I just think, thank you for the question, Mr. Griffith. I think persistent oversight, guidance, perhaps changes in policy in terms of the rules of the structure in which CDC does these block grants so that they can be specifically targeted only for mosquito control efforts and not for other things that a state may wish to sponsor, I think is.
I appreciate it. Dr. Peterson, I'm sorry I'm out of time, so I would give you a chance, but I don't have the time to respond, so I have to yield back, or to give you a response.
Thank you, Ms. Schakowsky. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. First, let me apologize. I'm the ranking Democrat on a hearing that's going on upstairs, and so